So we're just going to do a quick overview and have a look at Photoshop and just start to get our heads around some of the basics and where things are, etc. in Photoshop. So a quick overview. When you open up Photoshop, you'll be confronted with a screen like this. If you've never used it before, you won't have a bunch of images there. These are all obviously files that I've been working on. So you could reopen an old file, but really you've got two choices. You can open, say, an existing file that exists, one that you may have never opened before, and that's the same as opening any file on any application, or you've got the create new, which is what we're going to do at the moment. Now then, in here, we've got all sorts of decisions to make. And we're already going to start to have to get our head around some sort of digital imaging theory to even start opening up a new page. And some of the things I was kind of hinting at in the polls we were doing earlier. So up here, we've got save files, recent files, photo, print, art illustration, web, mobile, film. So really, that's giving us a clue to what you've got to think about when you're opening up and creating a new file. What's the ultimate destination for this particular piece of work? Where's it going to go? What are you going to be using it for? And these are giving you some kind of hints, okay? And what they are is, and when you click on one, we're going to go for print, okay? I've given you some sort of presets. Now then, because it's print, you can see here that we've got an A4 page. So it's starting to relate to printing technologies and printing formats, etc. So if I click on that, it's now pop that up in millimeters. Okay, so we've got the size of that. If we are working, for example, on web, it then defaults straight across to pixels, because we'd be using pixels as our unit of measurement. And then we've got different types of sizes of web pages. So if we were creating a template for a website, we've got options there. Okay. I'm going to go back to print, and I'll pop that back to millimeters. Okay. Now then, the other one I need to think about is this resolution down here, because the size of the resolution is really dependent on the quality of the print you want out of it. Now then, for sort of playing around and experimenting, etc., we're not really too concerned about the quality of the actual print. We're much better keeping the actual size of the file, the finished file down, because the higher the resolution, the more pixels basically are crammed in there, the more memory you need to save the image. So what we're going to do is we're just going to reduce that down to a basic screen resolution, because we're only going to be viewing this on screen. You'll notice when I clicked on the web, that automatically defaulted to 72, because on the web, that's going to be your default for most screens. Some high resolution screens on Macs, etc., go slightly higher than that, 90, maybe slightly higher, but it's so to the eye, it's very difficult to really tell the difference, which is why this has been a standard for as long as I can remember. So let's go back, A4, pop that into 72. You can update these later once you're in the program. And we're just going to leave these now, okay, and come back to what these mean in a wee bit. So we're just going to create that. So now we've got our page that's being displayed at 100% of its original size. So what we're going to do is just go through a process of drawing a few squares next to each other. And that should then just really kind of show us where all the different options and things are inside Photoshop. So bear with me here. I'm just moving my screen down because I've got my Zoom window in the way. Okay, so over here, we've got our tool palette. Some of those things are familiar. I'm sure many of you have played around at least once or twice with drawing programs, pen tools, rubber tools, all sorts of things in there, smudging tools, filling up tools. But we're interested in the square tool. Okay, if I hold that down, it also brings up other shapes in there, custom shapes, lines, rectangles, round edges, etc. I'm going to go and use the rectangle tool, and I'm going to just go and draw a shape here. The other thing to start thinking about when you're using the tools, okay, is along here are the properties for those tools. Yeah? And I could have drawn it with an opacity over it, so it's see-through. Okay, mode we'll come to in a wee bit. Over here, if I drop that down, it says pixels, path, and shape. Already, again, in the quiz that we did in the introduction, we were hinting at the notion of vectors and bitmaps and raster files. That's where you need to have some knowledge about what's going on there. At the moment, we're just going to stick with pixels because we're creating bitmap or raster images. Okay, so we've drawn our first square. The next thing you want to do is just copy that square and repeat it. Okay, so up here, the most powerful tool in Photoshop, the rectangular marquee tool. Okay, and you can see up here, we're starting to get some options. Maybe we'll have a look at those in a minute. But first of all, what we're going to do is just draw over that. Okay, that's it now, ready for selecting. That's the same way as when you highlight text in Word. Up here, we've got things like if we go and add, we can increase the size of it and change it. We can cut into it. But the reality is, I think in 25 years, I don't think I've ever used any of those tools to do anything. So I'll just quickly go back to that, and then I will reselect. But also up here, you do have something that is quite useful in the properties. It says normal. If I click off of that and just go and change that, if I had a fixed size, I can put it a size in pixels. So I do it at 100 by 100. Did that by 1,000, didn't I? There we go. That will always be, that is very useful, especially when you're copying lots of different images out from one file to another and you want them all the same size. That can be very useful. Aspect ratio is playing around. That will always be 2:1, no matter what you do with it. So if you wanted to force it into being a square, for example, which we use a lot when you're selecting, you've got that being forced. Okay, but for now, we'll just go back to normal. We're going to go and select. So I'm going to go up, edit, copy. I'm going to click on the screen to get rid of the selection. And then I'm going to go edit, paste. And now then, something has happened. If we come across here, probably the single most important panel on the board is your layers. And really, once you've got a grip with layers, that'll be you. You'll be up and running and be able to really use Photoshop. If you're getting confused about layers, then it's something you need to address quite quickly. Up here, I've got a move tool. So I'm just going to move that. And you can see now that it's only moving the thing that's on the layer. And that's the beauty of layers. They work what we call independently of each other. Okay, so there's that. Just going to move this back up so you can see the bottom of the screen. There are other options here, which we'll come to in a minute. And there are a range of other options in there, which we're going to come to in a minute. But let's go back to our layer for the time being and see what it can do. Let's decide now we actually want to change the color of that layer. If we click on here, we get the color box or color picker coming up. Now, again, we're now back into that realm of digital imaging theory. And to understand what's going on here, all of these various letters and numbers is really the essence of what we're about, and something that we'll be getting our head around, because we'll be needing that knowledge as we move forward on the course, especially when we're looking at how you actually computer code graphics in the next block and the block after. But just for now, for example, up here, we've got what we call hue selected. So in this box here, we're selecting a hue. So basically, the hue is just the type of color, simple as that, okay? I won't worry too much about the number that's going on next to it, but that's what's going on there. Now, but if we change that to this, we've got the purple up, but it's now given us what we call saturation, okay? That's how much gray we add to any given hue, okay? And you can see it's actually getting measured in percentages. And then finally, we've got brightness, how much black is added to any given image. And there are all sorts of other things going on down here. You've got your RGB, your CMYK. Again, we'll be talking in more detail about that. So I can leave that maybe a little brighter at that purple. Click OK on that. And then I'm going to go and use the fill tool, and I'm going to fill up my, my square. And it's only filled up on this layer. If I was to, for example, I'm just going to undo that, edit, clicked outside of there, you can see that it's now filled across the whole layer in the background. But I'm just going to fill that square. And then if I go back up to here, you could see that I could set the opacity. So it's see-through. And then there are all sorts of different ways of blending. This is what this up here is doing. You can see these are all different blend options for mixing up the layers together. Okay, we'll set it back to normal. You can see here, I don't actually want this white here. I just want the square on its own on the layer. If I was to just take the background off, you can see I've turned that off and on. I've now got that turned off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start thinking about how I can change that by using a different selection tool. And the Magic Wand tool has been around as long as I can remember, and is particularly useful. It's got various properties, which I'm not going to go into just now. But in essence, if I go and use the Magic Wand tool, you can see now it's just selected the white that I've got in there. Okay, and it's designed to select pixels of a similar kind, and the tolerance increases or decreases the amount of different pixels that it will select. So if I go up to edit, cut, I've now got rid of that, and now I've got my squares all neat and tidy, overlapping. I can also manually add a blank page. Now I could go and draw a different image on there. Okay, and I can start to think about ordering the layers. So they've got a different order. I can name the layers. Okay. If I need to, and certainly on a simple image like this, I can also, if I wanted to, I'll just get the pen tool and do something disruptive to it. Just get the pen tool, and you can see now lots of different properties are coming up for the pen tool, different sizes, different weights. If I just draw on there, and I think, oh no, I don't like that, I can then just dispose by dragging down and dispose of the layer. Finally, a special kind of layer. If I go into the text tool, you'll see up here, I've got a range of text options. I can go and choose a color. I can do all my usual selections of different font families, etc., up there. And if I click down into here, I can then start typing, and you'll see here I've got a special kind of layer, and you can see that it's identified as a text layer because it's working slightly differently. Different theory being used to store that piece of information at the moment. Now I've got all this stuff on screen, I can then start thinking about what I might want to do with this in terms of editing. And up here, I've got a range of options. So we'll just have a quick look through what some of them can do. In here, I've got, for example, the transform option. There's all sorts of other things going on in there, but if I wanted to scale up, it'll automatically, so there's me scaling that, and then just a click in the center will fix that. And there are all sorts of other options in there, which I'm not going to go into just now. Okay. And then inside the image itself, this adjusts the whole image. So let's say I'd gone in and I'd set it at 300 and thought, oh, no, I only wanted a 72. Here's the option. And then there's also an option there for increasing the size of the page. Okay, I'm not going to change that just now. So that's inside image. Okay, I can also in there start playing around with, funny enough, I can readjust if I didn't like that, the hue and saturation. On this example of just squares, it'd be just as easy to go and refill the square. But if I was working with a photograph, that really does come into its own, as you will see. I can also adjust all sorts of other things in there. I can invert things. I can increase the brightness and contrast. Okay. Then I won't worry too much about layer. That's where we start to get quite complex with what we're doing in Photoshop. There's now a complete menu for dealing with, for example, with text. You can see that, you know, this has got a full set of typographic options. Again, we'll be coming to that a bit later in this course. Then the dreaded filters. Let's just show you the classic blur. Okay, you can see now that's been blurred in the background. 3D, again, that's just a very specialized part of Photoshop that we don't really go very near. How we actually view the thing on the screen, zooming up, zooming down, putting on grids, which we'll be talking a lot about. And then all the different palettes that are starting to, if I wanted to hide the layers, which is something you never really do, I can pop that off and then I can pop the layers back on. Okay. One very, very, very useful palette that we pop up quite a lot is the history. Because I didn't really like that blur. So I'm going to go back there. Didn't even like the way I transformed the color. I can go back at any point in time and change that. So there's all sorts of other windows in there, okay, that you would use. So really, that's a quick overview of Photoshop. Tools down one side, properties of each tool here, controlling the overall layers and images up here, and then the palettes, various palettes popping up over here. And they will pop up in all sorts of different ways, as you saw when I popped the history up there. You know, I can dock them, I can do all sorts of things with them. You know, I can dock it into there if I really wanted to, move it around, but that's just kind of personal choice. Finally, saving the file. Again, now we need to come back to our digital imaging technology. If we go to Save As with this, we've got our Photoshop file. That's if we wanted to preserve all the layers, if we wanted to come back and re-edit the file at any given time. So there's normally the master, the template, the master document you'd be saving as a Photoshop file. Because it's not that transportable. You can't necessarily keep opening up that in all sorts of other programs. You wouldn't be able to put a copy of this, you know, up on a website, for example. And then we've got lots of standard file formats, which we'll be going into some detail with. If you wanted to save it as a compressed JPEG, you would save it as a JPEG here. Okay. There are other options for exporting images, which we're not going to go into in any great detail just now. But that's really very much the basic overview.